granola bars.
Hmm.
You ever just bite into one and think, ah, yes, sustenance?
Right.
Didn't think so.
Yeah, not my go-to snack.
But in Americana, that's kind of the point.
Right.
It's like this tiny little granola bar becomes this huge symbol.
Like a cultural earthquake in snack form.
Exactly. Ifemelu gets to America from Nigeria, and bam.
Welcome to America. Here's some compressed oats and disappointment.
It's almost like Adichie saying, like, okay, you want to talk about culture clash?
Nova, I got this.
Yes. It's brilliant, though.
Oh, absolutely. You're thrust into Ifemelu's world right away. She's dealing with all these new customs, new expectations.
Everything's upside down.
And what does she get offered?
The blandest, most American snack food imaginable.
It's perfect. Because right away we're in on the joke. This isn't just about what's on the snack table.
So, okay, we get the funny, but let's deep dive on this. What's the bigger picture?
Well, it forces us to think about what we consider normal, like what we take for granted. What seems like a simple welcome gesture, offering a snack, it can be so loaded.
Culturally loaded.
Absolutely. Adichie's subtly pushing us to think about our own assumptions, what's right, what's polite, and how someone from a totally different world might see those things.
It's like when I visited my friend's family in Japan, and they kept offering me these tiny dried fish as snacks.
Oh, no.
I'm a pretty adventurous eater, but let me tell you, my American palate was not prepared.
And that's the disorientation that Adichie captures so well. It's not even just about the food itself.
It's more this feeling of, wait, what do I do? How do I react?
Exactly. You're an outsider trying to crack this code of social cues. And it gets even more intense when Ifemelu's dealing with pressure to change more than just her eating habits.
You mean like the whole American accent thing?
Bingo! Adichie goes right for it. There's that scene where someone actually compliments Ifemelu on her accent. Like they assume she's adopted this American way of speaking.
And she's mortified.
Totally. It's heartbreaking because so many immigrants face this pressure to assimilate.
To erase the parts of them that make them different.
And it goes beyond just fitting in. It's about power. Whose voice is the right one? Who gets to decide? And how does that pressure to conform warp someone's identity? Adichie makes us confront that weight.
And it's not just about accents. She takes this idea even further with that American tribalism concept.
Oh, yeah. So good. It's almost like this satirical anthropology project.
Like she's cataloging the ways Americans put themselves in boxes.
We've got class, ideology, region. It's hilarious and terrifyingly accurate.
And then, of course, race is like this unavoidable elephant in the room. Or should I say, the country.
Right. Like she's saying, oh, you think you're being all subtle with your social circles? Let's call it what it is.
And she doesn't shy away from how the racial hierarchy actually functions, especially for a black immigrant trying to find her place in a country wrestling with its own racism.
It's complicated. And she doesn't let us off the hook with easy answers.
And the way she uses humor to point out the absurdity of it all. Like when she talks about how Jewish people are seen as both white, but also on a lower rung of the social ladder.
Right. It's layered. It's not just a simple us versus them. It's us and also us, but like this.
Nuance on top of nuance.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that makes Americanah so powerful. It challenges readers, even listeners who consider themselves to be aware, to really examine those unspoken rules they've internalized.
Those hierarchies we've all encountered. And how they shape how we view ourselves and each other.
Because it's not like this is just an American thing. These boxes, these categories we create for each other, they exist everywhere. Americanah just holds up this mirror and forces us to confront them.
And speaking of boxes, right?
Yeah.
Relationships can be tough.
Oh, tell me about it.
And Ifemelu, she jumps right into the dating pool when she gets to America.
Med first.
We've got Blaine, the super woke professor.
Right.
Then there's Kurt, who's got this whole thing about Ifemelu's hair.
Adichie's so smart about how she uses these relationships, though. It's not just romance. It's like she's dissecting these power dynamics and cultural expectations.
Each relationship becomes this microcosm of the bigger picture.
Exactly. So it's not just about Ifemelu finding love. It's about finding her place. In America. In the world.
In a culture that's not always so welcoming.
Which I think is something a lot of people can relate to, whether they're immigrants or not. You know, that feeling of, where do I fit in?
Totally. So let's take Blaine, for example. He's charming, intellectual, clearly passionate about racial justice.
What?
But he keeps hitting this wall with Ifemelu.
He keeps trying to understand her experience through this very specific African-American lens.
And it doesn't quite fit.
Right. Like he can't quite grasp what it means to be a Nigerian woman dealing with race in America, which is its own unique thing.
Like that saying, right? If you've met one Nigerian.
You met one Nigerian, exactly. And then you've got Kurt at the other end of the spectrum. He's captivated by Ifemelu's exoticness.
Especially her hair.
It's almost like he sees her cultural background as this novelty, something to admire from afar rather than actually understand.
Which I think a lot of people from marginalized backgrounds have experienced. Your curiosity, not a person.
And that fetishization of someone's culture, it can be so dehumanizing. Like, it's great to appreciate differences, but it can't come at the expense of someone's humanity.
Right. It makes you wonder, when you find yourself attracted to someone from a different background, what is it that draws you to them? Is it genuine curiosity, or are you just caught up in the surface stuff?
It's a question worth asking ourselves.
Yeah.
Because real connection, it needs empathy, a willingness to see the world through someone else's eyes.
And sometimes those relationships that challenge us the most, those are the ones that help us grow.
Absolutely. Growth often comes with a little friction.
And speaking of challenges, let's talk about Obinze for a second. His whole experience with the British immigration system is brutal.
Ugh, it's really hard to read.
It's like Adichie is holding up this giant mirror to how easily a system can dehumanize people.
Obinze's smart, ambitious. He just wants to build a life for himself. But the system doesn't care.
He's just a number of case file.
And I think that resonates even more strongly today with all the
Yeah.
debates we're having about immigration. Who deserves to be where? What are those decisions really based on? It's complicated.
Makes you think about all the privileges so many of us take for granted. The right passport, the right accent, even just knowing the right people.
And that awareness of privilege is crucial. It's not about guilt-tripping anyone. It's about acknowledging that the world isn't fair and then asking ourselves, what are we going to do about it?
How can we work towards a more just and equitable world for everyone?
Exactly.
And part of that is finding your own voice, speaking out against those injustices. Which brings us to Ifemelu's blog. This is where she really comes into her own.
Her blog is like this breath of fresh air. It's raw, it's funny, and it's so insightful. She doesn't hold back.
It's like she's saying, okay, well, are you ready to talk about this? Because I am.
And the title of her blog, Raceteenth, or Various Observations About American Blacks, those formerly known as Negroes, by a non-American Black. Brilliant.
So good. And that one post to my fellow non-American Blacks, talk about a mic drop moment.
It's like she's giving everyone permission to acknowledge the diversity within the Black experience. There isn't one single way to be Black in America or anywhere else.
And she does it with humor, which honestly makes it land even harder. Because she's not just lecturing, she's inviting you into this conversation.
Exactly. And using wit and irony to expose those uncomfortable truths we often avoid.
And it's so effective. Because she's not talking at people. She's sparking a dialogue, challenging all of us to really examine those assumptions we hold about race and identity. And that's what makes her voice so powerful. It's like she can make you laugh even when she's calling you out.
Right. It's that perfect blend of humor and insight. She never lets you forget that these issues are serious, but she also doesn't want you to get bogged down in the heaviness of it all.
It's a tough balance to strike.
Totally. And she does it brilliantly because ultimately she's writing from a place of personal experience. She's not afraid to be vulnerable to talk about her own struggles with code switching or dating or feeling like she doesn't quite belong anywhere.
Yeah, that feeling of being caught between two worlds. Which kind of brings us to Ifemelu and Obinze returning to Nigeria.
Ah, yes. The prodigal daughter and son return. Except it's not quite the happy homecoming they expected.
Not at all. It's more like that feeling of going back to your childhood home and realizing it's not the same.
You've outgrown it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's still this like bittersweet nostalgia, like you're chasing after something you can't quite grasp.
And that's the reverse culture shock Adichie captures so well. It's not just that they've changed, but Nigeria's changed too.
Everyone's moved on.
It's like looking in a mirror and seeing a stranger staring back at you. Someone who shares your history, but has been shaped by different experiences.
I keep thinking of that scene with the peacock on the roof of that crumbling mansion next to Ifemelu's apartment. It's such a powerful image.
Isn't it? You've got this stunning creature, a symbol of beauty and vibrancy against this backdrop of decay.
It's like this perfect metaphor for the whole experience of returning home and realizing that home no longer exists.
Or at least not in the way you remembered it. There's beauty in that melancholy, though, don't you think?
I do. It's like those old photographs that have faded with time. The colors aren't as vivid, but the memories they hold are still so rich.
Exactly. And those memories become part of who we are, even as we continue to evolve and change.
It makes you question that whole concept of home, doesn't it? What does that even mean? Is it a place, a feeling, A collection of people?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think it's something we're all searching for in our own way, that sense of belonging,
Yeah.
of being seen and understood.
The finding your tribe, your people in a world that often feels determined to keep us apart.
And that's the beauty of Americana. It reminds us that it's okay to exist in those in-between spaces, to embrace the messiness and the complexities of identity, to be a citizen of multiple worlds, even if it means constantly navigating those shifts in perspective.
It's a challenging idea, but also incredibly liberating. Like you said, it frees us from those narrow boxes and allows us to connect with each other on a deeper, more human level.
Because ultimately what matters isn't where we come from or what boxes we check. It's about embracing that shared humanity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Americana, it feels like we're left with more questions than answers. But maybe that's the point.
Maybe the real journey begins when we start asking those tough questions about identity belonging and what it means to create a more just and equitable world for everyone.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder those questions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Americana. We'll see you next time.